What's up, guys? Welcome into the Wolverine.com live recruiting show here exclusively on the YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, make sure to do so for free. Also, like this video, it helps us get in front of other Michigan fans. Obviously, it's a huge week. Michigan coming off a Rose Bowl win over Alabama, which was, just pretty awesome to witness yesterday. I know Zach and I weren't there, but our team guys, Chris Ballas, Anthony Broom, and Clayton Safey did a tremendous job of covering everything out there. So there's plenty of content here on the YouTube channel as well as the Wolverine.com. But today we're specifically going to talk about how this Rose Bowl win impacts recruiting. But before we do, two things. One, Zach, are you wearing a onesie?
It's a comfy, it's a big giant sweatshirt. I am feeling under the weather, and that's an understatement. So I need all the warmth as possible.
Well, it looks like Zach is wearing a futuristic onesie. The second thing we need to address is our sponsor for tonight's show, and that's Leonard Financial Solutions. Leonard Financial Solutions founder Jonathan Leonard wants to listen to you to get to know your story and how he can best help you. People often hesitate to contact a financial advisor because they think they have to know what they want first. Leonard Financial Solutions founder Jonathan Leonard starts with you at square one. He gets to know you and your unique situation. You don't want to outlive your retirement money. You don't want to make risky investments. You don't want your loved ones to experience financial insecurity. Leonard Financial Solutions wants to alleviate your fears by providing you with options for life insurance, income protection, retirement income, safe annuities, and Medicare. They take the time to explain the pros and cons of each product and will not rush you through the decision-making process, giving you the time you need to commit to a plan. When is the best time to sit down with a financial advisor? The answer is now. Whether you're just starting out, hoping to retire in the next 5 years, or already retired, Leonard Financial Solutions wants to help you. Get the expert financial advice without the high-pressure sales pitch at leonardfs.com or call 856-444-LIFE. Again, that's leonardfs.com or call 856-444-LIFE. All right. Appreciate Leonard Financial Solutions for doing that. Let's dive into Rose Bowl recruiting talk. So big picture, Zach, what do you think the Rose Bowl win means for Michigan recruiting?
I think it shows that Michigan proved itself on a national stage. 3 consecutive college football playoff appearances, but this is the first time that they have won their semifinals game. And not only that, it was against Alabama. Now, they did it in a way with a lot of, drama, a really good narrative, and just so much excitement at the end. There was everything went into play for Michigan to just have a historic, magical, whatever adjective you want to use. It was just a great win. I think it proved that Michigan is on that level with the Georgias, with the Bamas, with the Clemsons, schools that have routinely been in the college football playoff and has shown to be a juggernaut in the postseason. Now, I think the development in which Michigan got there, now you have elite coaching from positional coaches, you have elite strength and conditioning program, you have seen the transformations of players that have led to them becoming national title contenders, and then ultimately realizing their dream to go pro. I think that alone entices a recruit who wants to win, a recruit who wants to play in the biggest stages. Let's not forget too, Michigan's schedule next year is a gauntlet. Now, if you can go into a national title with it and then play with the millions of watching you, that's like the dream for a recruit, right? To be on that field of the Rose Bowl specifically. So Michigan did what it needed to do on the field, but I think the effect that it has for recruits is that they kind of realize that they can go to a school like that, get the proper resources, the proper amenities needed in order to reach their goals when it comes to their playing careers. So it was exactly how Michigan couldn't have been chalked up better than it was. Hats off to them.
Yeah, I think the game itself turned out in the best possible way if you were a recruit watching. For Michigan to come back while trailing in the fourth quarter and win in overtime against Nick Saban and Alabama, it kind of in dramatic fashion in the Rose Bowl. I think that speaks volumes to the type of team Michigan is, the culture they've built, just the win itself in that fashion to be able to grit out a win. I think really impressed recruits. I think what was on full display for prospects was the culture that Jim Harbaugh has instilled at Michigan, the just grind it out mentality, the Michigan versus everybody. I think all of that was were things that really caught the attention of recruits around the country. Now, on top of that, like I said, beating Alabama, I think Alabama has been on top of the college football world for quite some time, right? I feel like Alabama is a school that recruits most recognize. And I think that makes that win even sweeter, right? Beating Alabama, the team that these kids grew up watching win national championships, the team that's known as the GOAT team in the country, the GOAT head coach, for Michigan to take them down on the biggest stage. And it was the first game up. Everybody was watching that game. I think that made a huge impression on recruits. Now, we've seen recruits list Michigan in their top threes and the top fives and the top tens and the top 15s. Can they actually close with these recruits? I think it's safe to say that Michigan impressed guys across the board. I mean, you had guys respond to us yesterday that normally don't even respond or that haven't had as much interest in Michigan. Like an example is five-star cornerback Naeem Offord. I had never heard back from this kid at all. And yesterday he sends me a message about the win over Alabama, and he's from Alabama. So I think it caught the attention of kids that maybe weren't necessarily looking at Michigan. I think it heightened the interest of a lot of kids that were already high on Michigan. Like, on 300 running back Iverson Howard was one of the first guys to reply to my message. And he was like, that's why they're my leader. Jalen Williams had a great response, and Michigan's trending for him on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. Same with guys like Eli Owens. And we'll talk about some of these individuals here in a bit. But my point is, I think it caught the attention of guys that weren't necessarily interested. And it really moved the needle for guys that were extremely interested. But at the end of the day, I think the question goes back to, can Michigan close with not all of these guys? Obviously, we had more than 100 reactions, but can Michigan close with those elite guys, the guys that weren't as interested, or guys that maybe, saw Michigan as maybe a little bit of a flash in a pan? Do they see them now on that stage that you mentioned, Zach, being a Georgia, being an Alabama, being a Clemson, being what Ohio State was? Is Michigan at that level in the eyes of these recruits? So I think it's definitely trending in that direction if it's not there already. But are the wins on the field? Here's the question I'll pose. Are the wins on the field enough to lead to better recruiting results? Because despite back-to-back college football playoff appearances, back-to-back-to-back, 3 college football playoff appearances, 3 wins over Ohio State, 3 Big Ten titles, now a national championship appearance, Michigan's last 2 recruiting classes have finished outside of the top 15. So are the wins on the field, with now a national title appearance also under your belt, is that enough to get Michigan to recruit at a higher clip?
It reassures that you're going to get the kids that are culture fits, kids who have kind of are able to carry that torch, per se, that's already been built. Kids who kind of understand the operation behind the scenes, kids who kind of revel in that, kids who want to be challenged. And want to succeed on and off the field with a school like Michigan, you're going to get those kids. I think that's just a guarantee. You saw that a lot in the 24 class, kids that are just personality fits, kids who kind of, they have that demeanor about them that just screams Michigan football. It kind of goes back to your article that you posted on the Wolverine.com about NIL. Now, I think it's safe to say that Michigan is not on par with the rest of the country when it comes to NIL. That has to change in order for them to maybe eclipse that top 15, to get into the top 5, to get into the top 10. If it's based on what we're hearing and what's been reported about Michigan just not having that standard that the rest of the country has, it just leads them to a disadvantage. It's not, you're going to have kids, and I'm not going to take your thought away, but kids like Will Johnson, kids like JJ McCarthy. I know NIL wasn't around back then, but they were going to command NIL if they were 24s, 25s. Would Michigan have gotten them? Right? Let's say moving forward, Michigan does have that scale, something that has been championed by the coaching staff, like a base scale, or just more ways to monetize off individual brands. I think that's the catalyst to make that leap in order to get into that, to get those 5 stars, to get those generational players. The culture and the foundation and the winning and the commodity that has already been built guarantees you that you're going to have like a top 20 recruiting class, and you're going to have kids that can be plug and play starters in the transfer portal, kids who are have elite upside, developmental upside in the high school level. You're going to have that. We've seen that in the past 2 recruiting classes. It's guaranteed. To get that player who can be a day 1 starter, or a kid like a Will Johnson, you need to have something in place when it comes to the NIL front. And as soon as Michigan finally has a plan in place, I don't know whether or not we're ever going to see Michigan in the top 10 or top 5. I think that's just, it is what it is.
Yeah, I think the dynamics of recruiting have changed so much. I always think back to Michigan's first college football playoff appearance. And I remember I went out to Florida to see Raylan Wilson, who was committed at the time and obviously eventually flipped to Georgia. But I went down to see Raylan Wilson, and I was like, this is it. Because I was on the Texas beat before, right? So, and I was still fairly new on the Michigan beat. And I was like, this is it. I finally get to cover a team that's amazing on the field, and the recruiting is going to be amazing. It's going to be top 5 recruiting, national championships. It's going to be insane. And then everything continued to go upwards on the field, and things just went downhill on the recruiting trail. Wilson flipped, and then they finished, outside of the top 15 last year. They finished outside of the top 15 this year. And so obviously that didn't happen. Now, I think people saw my story headline on Twitter and kind of ran with it the wrong way. I'm not saying Michigan needs to do NIL like Miami or Ohio State, where you had Jeremiah Smith, the number 1 recruit in the country, not sign his NLI until his agent cleared things, right? I don't think that you need to really get crazy with it and be a Texas A&M or an Ohio State or a Miami or an Oregon or whatever, and, just straight up do pay for play for all these kids. Like, you don't need to do that, right? You have a great culture, you have great development. So I'm not asking Michigan to become an NIL powerhouse on the recruiting trail, because if you do become an NIL powerhouse, it might work at a place like Georgia or at Alabama, where you're just, you also have the advantage of being in the South and having more 5 stars just naturally located in your region. But I think it can kind of disrupt what you've built at Michigan. So what Michigan needs is the right balance. And that's what makes up the current roster, right? So you look at the 2020, 21, and 22 classes. Those classes were all top 15 classes, one being a top 10 class. And you had your top 50 level guys, JJ McCarthy, Will Johnson, Junior Colson, Donovan Edwards. I thought Blake Corum was a top 100 recruit, even though nobody believed me, I guess, or nobody agreed with me. But, I feel like Michigan has those types of guys mixed in with the guys they've developed, like Mason Graham, like Chris Jenkins, like Kenneth Grant. There's, Mike Sainer, still Rod Moore. There's so many guys that they've taken and developed, but you also have guys that Michigan hasn't developed or that didn't excel at Michigan that transferred out. Who remembers names like William Mohan and Osman Savage and Dan Villari, and there's the Andre Seldon. There's so many guys that did it. Cornell Wheeler. There's like so many random names that you can think of that didn't pan out. So you need the guys that you can develop that do have those tools that buy in along with high level recruits. And right now you're not recruiting in the same range that you once were. And so that's worrisome for the future. Right now, it's amazing that Michigan's going to the national championship game. It's amazing that we've had 3 college football playoff appearances, to cover. But at the same time, you are a little concerned about what comes after that, because I'm talking about sustained success for the future, for Michigan to be, I guess, what Ohio State was, if you're making a parallel to a fellow Big Ten team, and just reign supreme in the new expanded Big Ten, to consistently be in that top 4 on the field, to consistently be competing for national titles, winning national titles. I think that you have to have the right balance. You have to recruit in the way that you were recruiting and continue to have that development as well. So that's my concern, and that's the best explanation I can give, is Michigan isn't really recruiting at the level, quite at the level that they were for the classes that make up this team. And I think that, that obviously can change with improved NIL. I don't think Michigan needs to just do pay for play like crazy. They don't need to, do the Miami model. They don't need to drop bags. All they should have done already is have that base salary model in place, because that's something that's a guarantee that something hard that you can sell to recruits on the trail. If you come here, you'll make X, Y, and Z. It's guaranteed. X, Y, and Z on the roster makes that. It's an easy selling point. So you're putting your staff in a tougher position to land top talent when that doesn't need to be the case. And it's not like Jim Harbaugh is anti-NIL for recruiting as well. I mean, he's the guy that, supported the base salary model, right? Going back literally years ago at this point. And it was always coming soon. It was always coming soon. It was always coming soon. And it's still not here. It's 2024 and soon still hasn't come. So I think the 2 things for Michigan to have long-term success, to improve its recruiting ranking. So to accomplish the improvement of the recruiting rankings and to have that long-term success, I think you need a better commitment to NIL. And you obviously have to extend Jim Harbaugh as well. I mean, he's the big piece. And you can fix the little things like the recruiting department, getting better hot dogs at the barbecue, finding a linebackers coach. But I think the 2 things that are imperative to the long-term success of this program, to becoming a juggernaut, is the extension of Jim Harbaugh as well as the improvement of NIL. Now, I think we can all enjoy the ride here as Michigan competes for a national title. But I think for us, me and Zach, that cover recruiting, it's just a little frustrating to not see, like, it goes back to the original story I told. It's a little frustrating to not see the on-field success translate to the recruiting trail. Like, why not? Michigan has everything. It's Michigan. It's the winningest program of all time. The resources are crazy. The staff has NFL ties. The NFL production is there. The academics are amazing. Jim Harbaugh is a legend. Like, everything is there. Why? Like, that's the most frustrating part to me. I'm not coming at this from a place of animosity because, as many of you know, I'm not a Michigan fan. I didn't grow up a Michigan fan. I'm coming from it like, everything is there, man. Like, why? I don't know. That's really the best way I can put it. Because it's fun to cover, highly ranked recruits and to have excitement around the recruiting. It makes it that much better. And so I feel like if you can get those two things in place, the NIL, the extension, then you can have that. I feel like I've rambled forever, Zach, so I'm going to throw it to you really quick. You got messages back from a bunch of recruits, as did I. We have more than 100 reactions over at thewolverine.com. And by the way, if you want to ask a question on tonight's show, hit that super chat button. That money goes directly to our travel budget so we can see recruits across the country. But give me a few recruits, not really necessarily a handful, just a couple names that you think, this win really moved the needle for. You were really impressed with their responses after the win.
I'm going to start with the Ohio guys, obviously. They were some of the first to get back to me. They were some of the first to really have a specific reason as to why they were impressed with the win. Guys like Bo Jackson on 300 running back, Marquise Davis on 300 athlete, Trey McNutt, top 100 quarterback. If the win meant anything too on the recruiting trail, you can pump that up into areas where you have direct competition against your rivals. Now, specifically with Ohio State, 3 straight wins over the Buckeyes, 3 straight college football playoff appearances, and now a chance for the national title. That's where you pull the trigger. You keep your foot on the gas pedal. Guys like that who understand the rivalry because they've grown up around it and they both have these guys have offers from both schools. They visited both schools. They're top targets for both schools. Those are the kids where you can make a difference in terms of winning. Now, guys too, like maybe the West Coast kids who grew up with the Rose Bowl, some of them in their backyards. Now, those California kids, those Washington kids.
Well, it looks like we lost Zach. Looks like he's having some technical difficulties. We'll get back to Zach in a second while he kind of reloads there. But well, that's not the comment I wanted. I think something that Dred Roberts here mentioned is the only people that still think Michigan has an NIL problem are the media. And that's not really true. I mean, you had Roman Wilson, who's one of, the Rose Bowl heroes, come out and say that, NIL could be better at Michigan, right? And when I'm talking about NIL, I don't mean NIL in terms of the team. I think that a lot of guys on the team are doing great. Obviously you can point to Blake Corum, you can point to JJ McCarthy, but not everybody's going to be JJ McCarthy and Blake Corum. So a lot of these recruits want guarantees that they're getting at other schools. And that's the thing when you're talking about recruiting. Yes, Michigan's doing fine. I think Michigan's doing fine. The Roman Wilson comment is what it is, but I think Michigan's doing fine with team NIL. But there's nothing in place to sell to recruits other than this is what JJ makes, this is what Blake Corum makes. There's nothing concrete that you can sell on the recruiting trail. They're doing nothing in terms of NIL recruiting. And I think that's where you have to differentiate. So if it's not about the media calling out NIL, I don't really deal with the team and its NIL stuff. I'm talking about solely about recruiting and again, finding the right mixture of guys that you hit on with evaluations and can develop, and guys like Will Johnson, guys like JJ McCarthy, guys like Blake Corum, those high level recruits. So anyway, Zach, you completely dipped off. Not really sure what happened there, but I think you were talking about, getting into California as well.
Yeah, I mean, just specific areas where Michigan can have a presence in that maybe winning can make a difference in hotbeds that maybe schools have dominated in the past. Keep in mind too, Michigan has expanded into the West Coast for the Big Ten, right? Like you have 4 schools in Oregon, Washington, UCLA, USC in the Big Ten now. That win too kind of shows, kids in that area, they can go to a school like Michigan. They have opportunities to go back to their hometown, play in a stadium like the Rose Bowl, a game that they have grown up loving, a game that they have grown up just reminiscing about maybe one day they will play in it. And the fact that Michigan did it in that way, I think that just makes such a difference. Now, schools like the West Coast, Ohio, there are certain positions too that really stood out to me when we were kind of like organizing it. There were so many offensive line guys in the 25 class that responded to both of us. I think it just Jerome Moore, hats off to him for the season that he has had. Acting head coach, going 4 undefeated in those 4 games as acting head coach, having that much responsibility as the offensive line coach, sole play caller, and then the interim head coach in such marquee games, including Penn State and Ohio State, and then having such a raw talent for recruiting and having a genuine personality and having just the whereabouts to develop relationships outside of football. Hats off to him again. A couple others too. Look how many top 100s kind of responded to us too. The level of talent that was watching that game, that was just impressed with the way Michigan handled business, the way that they fought till the end, the way that they won. I think that, again, winning is going to move the needle, but as we've mentioned before, there has to be something in place too with NIL. But I think it just, this isn't the first time that we have done this too, right? Like recruit reactions. We've done it for the Ohio State game too. And this is the second time that over 100 guys have responded to us. They're not going to get all 100 guys, but at the very least, people are paying attention. People are showing a different, people are showing a viewpoint of Michigan that maybe might not be the case if they weren't winning. And they're doing it with players that are game-changing players based on our evaluations. And then the last one, the one that really just impressed me the most, Marcus Wimberly, safety out of Arkansas, 2025 kid. His dad posted a video of Marcus, who visited Michigan and has an offer, just having his shirt off, parading around the living room and celebrating as if he was on the team already. Now, that was the only video that was online, but can you imagine how many others might have had the same reaction? Those who don't care about how they act or how they perceive themselves in that basking in that glory. That's huge. Now, I think it's just another example of just, kids want to win. They want to be in a winning culture. Adding more to that will get them up to another level, as we've been talking about these past few minutes.
Definitely. So we only have a few minutes left on the show. We have more than 270 people watching live right now. So we should have 270 likes. Make sure to like this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. We're putting up a ton of video content. So yeah, like this video, subscribe. Also subscribe to the Wolverine.com today for even more recruiting and Rose Bowl coverage. So, I'll end the show with a few of the guys that caught my attention. One wasn't even a guy that responded to me. It was a guy that responded to you, and that's Gatlin Bear. He's the top remaining target in the 2024 recruiting class. And obviously he's paying close attention to how these teams are doing, what the situations look like at both programs. And I'm talking about Michigan and Oregon for Bear. As you can see, he's the number 43 overall prospect in the country. Michigan has the lead on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. But, Bear has expressed some concerns about Michigan's future with Jim Harbaugh's status kind of up in the air, right? And so I think that that's not going to really resolve itself anytime soon. But I think that, or at least not, in the very, very immediate future in coming days. But I think the Rose Bowl win had to have moved the needle. Seeing Roman Wilson make those plays at the end of the game, seeing how he could add a different element to the Michigan offense with his game-changing speed. I mean, the kid runs in the 10.2s in the 100-meter. And then I think, him having those concerns about Jim Harbaugh, it goes back to what I said earlier in the show. Seeing the culture, seeing the way they beat Alabama, the way they picked up, guys like Samaj Morgan after those mistakes, the way they all believed in each other. You could really see the family aspect of Michigan on full display. So maybe that lets Bear know, hey, if Jim Harbaugh does leave in 2 years when I'm back from my mission, because he is going on a mission and won't return until 2026, which is the reason he has those concerns. I think it at least shows, hey, even if Harbaugh is not there, that culture is already there. That family aspect's already there. That brotherhood is there. So I don't really have to worry as much when I do come back from my mission, because it's not just about Jim Harbaugh. Obviously, he plays a gigantic role in all of this, and I think it's imperative to get him to sign and do that extension. But in the case that he does not, at least you do have that culture already built, and you have everything that Michigan has to offer, the development and the opportunity to make an immediate impact and the academics and just, again, everything that comes with the University of Michigan. Just some underclassmen that caught my attention. Chris Ewald was really fired up, top 100 cornerback commit. I mean, he's a guy that's, getting NIL talks from Miami and Florida State and others. I think keeping him in the class, being the leader of the defense is key. So he was really fired up with his quote. I think Jalen Williams, I mentioned earlier, 4-star edge out of Chicagoland, I think is a guy Michigan could get on board somewhat maybe early. They have the lead coming out of the Ohio State visit, or the visit for the game against Ohio State. Same thing with Eli Owens, 3-star tight end out of Tennessee, another guy they really like that, was fired up in the quotes. Those are just a handful of guys. I thought the receivers had some really good responses. I mean, you had top 100 guys like Andrew Marsh and Kalik Lockett that have visited Michigan in the past, visited Michigan this past year, really show excitement about, Michigan's offense, the way they were able to come back. So yeah, I think those are the ones that come to mind. And then going back to Zach, I think something he pointed out while he was kind of cutting out, so I'm not sure if it really resonated with everybody, was just the Ohio kids, right? Seeing Michigan beat Ohio State for 3 straight years and now go to a national title, and seeing that Ohio State could struggle again. They don't really have that quarterback in place right now. I think the window is there for Michigan to land even better talent out of Ohio. And you just saw Jordan Marshall, Mr. Ohio, leave Ohio. So seeing guys like Trey McNutt and Bo Jackson and Marquise Davis, seeing what they had to say, I think if you're going to get elite Ohio guys, which is extremely difficult, now is the time to do that. Coming off those wins over Ohio State, having a little bit of uncertainty in Columbus, appearing in a national championship game, there is your opportunity that, Steve Clinkscale has built the foundation or had the building blocks there by landing some of the more underrated Ohio guys. And they took the next step with Jordan Marshall, and now they can take an even bigger step. It is a really strong year in the state of Ohio in 2025. So opportunity is there. All right, guys, we've gone over time. So thanks for watching this video. If you joined in late, you can watch the full replay here on our YouTube channel. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, also subscribe to thewolverine.com. I will be here tomorrow to answer all of your questions, and Zach, we'll see you next week.